It's time for Lefties Losing It. It's predictable, but I have more CNN nincompoopery. Yes, that is a word, look it up. Or just watch CNN because you'll be overwhelmed by nincompoops indulging in endless nincompoopery. I'll be bringing you CNN anchor Caitlin Collins being comprehensively owned soon. But first, let's look at the aftermath and CNN host Dana Bash claiming that it's misinformation to say that CNN is anti-America.
Say, for the record, since we heard President Trump say in the Oval Office that CNN hates our country, CNN does not hate our country. That should go without saying.
Oh, really, Dana? Let's go to the tape. I could play hours of footage of CNN hating on America, but here's just 30 seconds of CNN being anti-American miscreants.
Here's a breaking news. We live in a racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic country.
Everything they're doing runs against making America great.
Well,
it was never great, so I'm not going to say the again part, but making America great.
Kicking off the Independence Day weekend, President Trump will be at Mount Rushmore, where he'll be standing in front of a monument of two slave owners and on land wrestled away from Native Americans, told that be focusing on the effort to, quote, tear down our country's history.
Now to what sparked this latest CNN outrage. Earlier today, Caitlin Collins was again advocating on behalf of a gangbanger from El Salvador who was deported to El Salvador. Apparently that is a massive mistake that needs to be corrected. Listen here to how President Trump introduces Caitlin Collins.
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
A MS-13 gangbanger in the country illegally. Apparently it's a massive mistake to deport him. Now, President Trump called on the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to respond to the question, and then Stephen Miller. Even Mark Rubio chipped in. Mic drop after mic drop. This was glorious.
First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country.
President Trump then called on senior advisor Stephen Miller to weigh in, given CNN is obsessed with this case.
As you know, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant. Because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. That neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for him to get him back?
Yep, even after all of that, Caitlin wants to know if Trump is going to ask the gangbanger be returned to America.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked President Bukele, can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to have suggested that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States?
Yes, it is preposterous, President Bukele. No one would expect you to smuggle a terrorist into the United States, other than CNN, of course.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin.
I give up. Even the Secretary of State weighing in wasn't enough for CNN.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility.
Like I said, nincompoopery, weapon grade nincompoopery. Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, why do the American left, CNN, the Democrats, keep pushing on this issue where Donald Trump enjoys overwhelming support? The American people, and the polling shows this, support the deportation program. They want these gangbangers in particular out of the country. We're talking about the worst of the worst here. We're not just talking about people in the country illegally. Someone who was found to be an MS-13 gang member, and they won't let it go.
It really is fascinating. It feels like it's a dysfunctional robot. Like the way she was asking the same questions in the software update just didn't happen. And it's kind of no matter who said it, and all the heavy hitters in the administration, one after the other, were coming, and it's going back to that same talking point. I think also since they're so much losing in the big picture of this issue, it's actually fascinating how much public support has shifted in a relatively short period of time to deporting all illegals, not only the violent ones, and they still do this. So when they've lost the big picture, they like to go into minutia. And they've had a couple of small wins along the way in this particular case, where one court said that he can be deported, but not to El Salvador, even though that's his home country, because he claimed persecution or whatever it is. That's still working its way up the court, but in the interim, they got a little bit of a win. And that's why I think CNN is just latching on to that one little detail and forgoing the big picture and the fact that they're really outside of where the American population is.
But even on a micro level with this particular case, you've got someone who's in the country illegally, they're from El Salvador, they're being deported to El Salvador, and somehow this is the one case that they want to highlight to show why this program is flawed. It's absolutely mad.